There's a specific kind of stupidity that only reveals itself in hindsight. The kind where, at the time, you're just living your life, completely unaware that the universe is quietly arranging a spectacular display of your own gullibility. That's exactly where I was on the day everything started unraveling. A walking, talking exhibit of blissful ignorance. It all began with an unexpected invitation. Mia waltzed into the living room, looking suspiciously pleased with herself. "Max, guess what?" she chirped, flopping onto the couch like someone who had definitely just done something they weren't supposed to. Now, let me clarify. Mia didn't do guess what moments. She did, "Oh, by the way, I spent $500 on throw pillows because they spoke to me moments." So naturally, I squinted at her. "All right, hit me." "We got invited to a wedding," she announced, as if this were the highlight of my entire existence. A wedding. My mind immediately conjured an image of overpriced suits, small talk with distant acquaintances, and speeches that went on for 3 days. "Fantastic," I deadpanned. "Whose?" Mia's smile twitched. "Oh, you don't know them." Now, let's pause here. That's not a normal response. If I don't know them, why are we invited? Was I randomly entered into some kind of wedding raffle for people who enjoy torture? But did I ask that? No, because I was a moron. Instead, I just nodded, already accepting my fate of sitting through a ceremony where 2 strangers declared eternal love, while I calculated how many more weddings I'd have to attend before it became socially acceptable to start faking my own death. Then came the second odd thing. Mia was excited. Like, beyond normal excited. Like, I just won a free vacation and also found $20 in my pocket, excited. At the time, I chalked it up to Mia being Mia. She loved weddings. Loved the decorations, the drama, the free champagne. But looking back, yeah, that enthusiasm? That wasn't about the wedding. That was about who was going to be there. And ladies and gentlemen, that is what we call foreshadowing. If I had known what kind of disaster awaited me, I would have faked a medical emergency. Something dramatic. Maybe a rare condition where my body shuts down if I hear the phrase "for better or worse" more than 3 times in a row. But since I didn't have the foresight to invent a fake illness, I found myself trapped in the front row of a wedding that I had no business attending. The venue was obnoxiously fancy. The kind of place where even the trees looked expensive. It was one of those outdoor weddings with chairs that had tiny bows tied to them, because apparently, even chairs need accessories at these things. There was also a violinist playing some song that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Mia, of course, was in her element. She was all smiles, chatting up strangers like she had been waiting for this day her entire life. I, on the other hand, was trying to figure out if I could sneak out without anyone noticing. The answer was no, because Mia had developed a sixth sense for detecting when I was considering an escape. Then, things got weird. About 15 minutes before the ceremony started, I noticed a guy staring at Mia. And I don't mean the kind of polite glance you give someone when you recognize them from somewhere. No, this was the kind of staring that belonged in a courtroom exhibit labeled Suspicious Behavior, Exhibit A. He was sitting 3 rows behind us, dressed in a suit that looked like it came with a side of arrogance. Dark hair, smug expression, the kind of guy who probably had an entire collection of overpriced watches just to show people he could tell time better than them. Now, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have cared. But there was something about the way Mia didn't react that set off every alarm in my head. She knew he was looking at her. She had to. But instead of acting surprised or annoyed, she was ignoring him. And not in the casual way you ignore a guy who is bad at subtlety. This was the kind of ignoring that takes effort. So, being the observant husband that I am, I decided to do something revolutionary. I asked a question. Who's the guy that keeps looking at you like he's about to give a TED talk on your personal life? Mia's reaction was about as convincing as a bad alibi. She gave me a quick, dismissive shrug. Just someone I used to know. Now, let's analyze this response for a second. There are a lot of ways to describe people you used to know. Old coworker, high school friend, weird neighbor who once tried to sell you a pyramid scheme. But Mia went with the most vague, least informative answer possible. A normal husband might have let it go. I, however, am not normal. Used to know how? I pressed. Mia sighed. The kind of sigh that says, "Why are you asking me things when I clearly don't want to answer?" Then she waved her hand like she was shooing away an imaginary fly. "It's not important. Just focus on the wedding." Right. Because nothing gets me in the wedding spirit like my wife avoiding basic questions. But fine. I let it drop. Mostly because the ceremony was starting, and there's only so much whisper arguing you can do before people start giving you side-eye. The actual wedding was exactly what you'd expect. Vows, crying, a guy in the back taking pictures on an iPad like he was filming a documentary. But I wasn't paying attention to any of that. Because every time I glanced over at Mia, that guy was still staring. And Mia? She was still ignoring him. The reception was held in a tent that probably cost more than my entire childhood home. Mia immediately disappeared into the crowd, which was fine by me, because I needed a drink. I made my way to the bar, ordered something strong, and was about to enjoy my temporary escape when, "Max, right?" I turned, and there he was. Exhibit A. Up close, he was even more annoying. He had that confident, overly friendly vibe that made my instincts scream danger. "Yeah," I said slowly, because I wasn't about to make this easy for him. "And you are?" He smiled like he was about to sell me something. "Ethan." "I know, Mia." I didn't shake his hand. Not because I'm rude, but because I already hated everything about him. "Oh, yeah?" I said, playing dumb. "How do you two know each other?" His smile widened. "Wow, she really didn't tell you?" And there it was. That tone. That smug, self-satisfied, "I know something you don't" tone. I didn't blink. "Guess not." Ethan let out a chuckle, like he was enjoying himself way too much. "Man, that's interesting." I tilted my head. Not as interesting as a grown man being cryptic for no reason. He laughed again, but it was the kind of laugh that wasn't actually amused. More like he was deciding how much he wanted to mess with me. Then, he pulled out his phone. And whatever he was about to do, I knew one thing for certain. It was going to ruin my night. Ethan held his phone like he was about to announce the winning lottery numbers, only the prize was a one-way ticket to complete humiliation. I had options here. Snatch the phone out of his hand, throw my drink at him, pretend I suddenly didn't speak English, but instead, I did what any rational person would do. I stared at him like he was the world's most annoying street magician and said, "Go on, then. Impress me." He smirked, then turned the phone toward me. Now, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I once bought a used car from a guy who refused to make eye contact. I once let Mia convince me that owning a hairless cat would be fun. But standing there, watching Ethan scroll through his phone with the smug energy of someone who enjoyed other people's misery, that was the moment I realized my biggest mistake of all. I had walked into this wedding thinking my biggest problem was going to be a long speech. Ethan tapped the screen, then held the phone up to my face. And there it was. The image that took my already bad night and set it on fire. Mia, sitting in what was very clearly a hotel room, her face turned away from the camera like she had no idea the picture was being taken. And next to her, none other than Ethan himself. I stared at it, my brain playing a fun little game called, "Let's try to pretend this means nothing." Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a work trip. Maybe. Ethan tapped the screen again, and a second photo appeared. Same hotel room. This time, Mia was laughing, mid-conversation, her hand on his knee like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yeah. No innocent explanations were coming to save me here. Ethan tucked his phone back into his pocket and took a sip of his drink like he hadn't just detonated my entire life. "Figured you should know," he said casually, as if he were commenting on the weather. I didn't respond, mostly because I was trying to decide if it was physically possible for a person to drown in their own rage. He let out a dramatic sigh. "Look, man, I get it. This sucks. But hey, at least now you don't have to waste any more time playing house with someone who's—" I cut him off before he could finish whatever smug little speech he was about to give. "What exactly do you want here, Ethan?" His eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean?" I gave him my best. "I'm dangerously close to ruining your evening look." "I mean, what's your goal? You showed me the pictures. Congratulations. Are you expecting me to thank you? Shake your hand? Buy you a drink?" Ethan had the audacity to laugh. "No need for all that. Just figured you'd want to know who you're really married to." I tilted my head, pretending to think. Right. Because you're just a stand-up guy, out here doing community service for clueless husbands. His smirk faltered, just slightly. I don't need anything from you, Max. Then why are you telling me? I pressed. Because if you and Mia had some grand, tragic love story, wouldn't it make more sense to keep your mouth shut? Unless, of course, this isn't about honesty. It's about you getting some kind of sick satisfaction out of being that guy. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a brief, beautiful moment, I thought I had actually managed to shut him up. But then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like we were old friends sharing a secret. Or maybe I just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized your perfect little marriage wasn't so perfect. I smiled at him, not because I was happy, but because I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to make him deeply uncomfortable. Well, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. Glad you got your fun for the evening, buddy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go pretend to care about cake flavors. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there. Now, here's the thing. At no point did I think, maybe he's lying. Maybe it's all a misunderstanding. No, Ethan didn't have the creativity for that kind of elaborate hoax. The photos were real. The hotel room was real. But the way I saw it, this wasn't his win. Because if Ethan thought he was the one who got to control the story here, he was in for a very rude awakening. I wasn't going to confront Mia. Not yet. No, first, I was going to do something much more satisfying. I was going to let her think she got away with it. There's a certain kind of power in knowing something someone else thinks they've successfully hidden from you. It's like holding the remote control to a show they think they're directing. And in this particular case, I was going to make sure Mia's grand production ended in the most spectacularly inconvenient way possible. I spent the rest of the wedding reception playing the role of the oblivious husband. I smiled, I laughed. I even let Mia pull me into one of those painfully long couples dances where people pretend to be in a perfume commercial. Every time she leaned in to whisper something sweet, I smiled back like a guy who had no idea she had a side hobby in hotel room bonding activities with Ethan. And the best part? She had no clue that I knew. But I wasn't about to have some dramatic confrontation over champagne and bad speeches. No. I was going to take my time. Because revenge, much like good barbecue, is best when it's slow-cooked. The first step? Making sure Mia had the absolute best week of her life. That Monday morning, I woke up early and made her breakfast. Full spread, pancakes, eggs, coffee just the way she liked it. She came into the kitchen, eyes wide. Because let's be honest, the last time I voluntarily cooked before noon was probably never. "What's all this?" she asked, clearly trying to figure out if I had hit my head. I smiled at her like the perfect, adoring husband. Just felt like treating my beautiful wife today. She tilted her head, clearly suspicious, but then she grinned and sat down, happily digging into her plate. Step 1. Make her feel extra secure. The next few days, I was the most attentive husband on the planet. Compliments, spontaneous date nights, little surprises. I even texted her things like thinking about you. Hope you're having a great day. In the middle of the afternoon, she started looking at me like I had been replaced by an alien. But the thing about guilt? It makes people accept kindness without questioning it too much. By Thursday, she was practically floating. She probably thought her little secret was making her more appreciative of me, that it was inspiring her to be a better wife. The irony was so thick, I could have spread it on toast. And then, right when she was at peak, I have the best husband ever levels of delusion. I started phase 2. Mia and I had this mutual friend, Adam. He was the kind of guy who always knew things. The little social tidbits, the gossip, the connections between people that no one else really paid attention to. And more importantly, he had a big mouth when properly motivated. So I called him up, invited him for drinks, and after a few casual conversations about completely unrelated topics, I steered the discussion in a very specific direction. Man, it's weird how people think they can get away with stuff. I mused, swirling my glass lazily. Adam, predictably, perked up. Oh yeah? Who are we talking about? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice, just enough to make it seem like I wasn't about to hand him the biggest piece of gossip of the year. I probably shouldn't say anything, but let's just say Mia's been getting a little too friendly with someone. Adam's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Are you serious? I shrugged. Look, I'm not one to start drama, but I saw some things at that wedding. And let's just say, if I were Ethan, I'd probably avoid standing too close to open windows. The thing about Adam? He lived for chaos. He was practically vibrating in his seat, already running through the mental Rolodex of people he needed to share this with, and I let him, because I knew that by the time the weekend rolled around, half the city would be whispering about how Mia was pulling a double shift in the betrayal department. Now, I could have stopped there. I could have let the slow, creeping realization settle in as Mia started noticing the side glances, the awkward pauses in conversation. But why let things play out naturally when I could have a little more fun? So, I took it up a notch. I started leaving little hints around the house. A hotel keycard, which I had conveniently picked up from a friend who worked in hospitality, casually left near her purse. A receipt from a jewelry store tucked into her nightstand, just enough to suggest something was going on without outright saying it. And then, the piece de resistance. I made a dinner reservation at the same hotel she and Ethan had been so fond of. The moment we arrived, Mia was already on edge. She barely looked at the hostess, her eyes darting around like she expected Ethan to pop out of a potted plant. And then, just as we were being seated, I made my final move. I leaned back in my chair, gave her a warm smile, and said, "Crazy thing. I ran into Ethan earlier this week." Mia froze, just completely locked up like a malfunctioning robot. "You what?" "Yeah," I said, sipping my drink. "We had a great chat. He showed me some pictures. Really interesting stuff." I watched as the blood drained from her face, as her brain started frantically trying to do the math on just how much I knew. And then, I leaned forward, lowered my voice, and said the words that would haunt her for weeks. "Don't worry, honey. I've got plenty of surprises left." Mia was unraveling. Not in the dramatic, soap opera kind of way where she'd collapse onto the floor and start wailing about how she'd made a terrible mistake. No, her unraveling was the slow, creeping kind. The kind where you could see the panic trying to claw its way out, but she was fighting to keep it hidden under forced smiles and casual laughter that sounded like it had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in terrible liars. She barely touched her food at dinner. Every time I made a vague comment like, "Funny how people always get caught when they least expect it," or "Some secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they?" she'd grip her fork like it was a weapon and let out a strangled little laugh. It was beautiful, but I wasn't done yet. Now, most people, when they catch a cheating spouse, go straight for the confrontation. They demand answers, scream, maybe throw a vase. That's all very dramatic, but the problem is, it's too fast. It gives the guilty party a single moment of panic, then a lifetime to twist the story however they want. No, I wanted Mia to suffer in the long term. I wanted her to wake up every morning unsure if today would be the day her entire world collapsed. So, I took it a step further. The next morning, I started planting more seeds. I walked into the kitchen while she was making coffee and casually hummed a song. Not just any song. The same song that had been playing in the background of one of those little hotel room pictures Ethan had shown me. She flinched so hard she nearly dropped her mug. "Oh," I said, looking up like I had just remembered something. "I heard that song the other day, and it's been stuck in my head ever since. You ever get that?" Mia swallowed so hard I could see her throat move. Yeah, sure." I smiled. "Weird how certain songs just bring back memories, huh?" She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people do when they've just realized they left the oven on at home but they're too far away to turn back. A few hours later, I made my next move. I started sending random texts. Not to Mia, but in front of Mia. I'd pull out my phone, type something, smirk to myself, and then put it away like I was enjoying some inside joke with a mystery person. It took exactly 2 hours before she cracked. "Who are you texting?" she asked, trying and failing to sound casual. I glanced up, like I had forgotten she was there. "Oh, just someone who knows things." That was it. No elaboration. Just a vague, unsettling sentence that meant absolutely nothing, and at the same time, everything. I left the house for a few hours after that, just to let her sit with her thoughts. I could picture her pacing, checking her phone, debating whether to call Ethan, wondering how much I knew and if her life was about to explode. By the time I got back, she looked like she had spent the entire day watching a horror movie where the villain whispered her name from the shadows. And then, the real fun began. I walked in, tossed my keys on the counter, and let out a satisfied sigh. "Great day," I said cheerfully. Mia, who had been pretending to read a book for the past hour, finally snapped. "What's going on, Max?" I turned, pretending to be confused. "What do you mean?" She forced a smile, but her eye was twitching. "You've been acting weird." I raised an eyebrow. "Weird how?" She hesitated, clearly debating how much she could accuse me of without revealing anything herself. I don't know. Different." I nodded slowly, as if I was really thinking it over. Then I took a step closer. "You know," I said, lowering my voice just enough to make it unsettling, "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately." Mia swallowed. "Oh." I leaned in a little. "Yeah, just about people. Trust. The kind of things you don't really question until suddenly." I snapped my fingers, making her jump. "Everything starts making sense." She let out a nervous little laugh. "That's deep." I held her gaze for an uncomfortably long time before finally stepping back and clapping my hands together. "Anyway, I think I'm gonna take the day off tomorrow. You and I should spend some quality time together." Mia blinked. What?" "Yeah," I said, all cheerful again. "Just the two of us. No work, no distractions. You and me. Maybe a little drive, go somewhere nice, have a real honest conversation." Mia looked like I had just suggested we reenact a scene from a crime documentary. "Oh," she said weakly. "That sounds great." "Fantastic," I said, giving her a wink. "Let's make it a day to remember." And just like that, Mia had a new problem. Because now, she had exactly 24 hours to sit with the question. Was tomorrow the day everything fell apart? Mia barely slept. I know this because I barely slept, but for entirely different reasons. I was up because I was enjoying every second of this slow-motion disaster I was orchestrating. She, on the other hand, was up because her brain was doing Olympic-level gymnastics trying to figure out if her entire life was about to implode. By morning, she looked like she had aged a decade overnight. Dark circles, twitchy movements, the whole deer in the headlights aesthetic. It was honestly impressive. "Morning beautiful," I said as I strolled into the kitchen, all smiles. She flinched. That's how far we had come. My good morning was now a source of psychological warfare. I poured myself some coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her stare at her phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. I figured she had probably spent the past few hours trying to come up with some kind of plan. Maybe she considered coming clean. Maybe she debated lying more. Maybe she thought about just packing a bag and disappearing into the night like an international fugitive. Didn't matter. It was too late. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "ready for our big day?" She forced a smile so unconvincing it should have been studied by scientists. "Of course." We got in the car, and I made a big show of being in a fantastic mood. Light music, casual conversation, a few jokes thrown in. Meanwhile, Mia sat there stiff as a board, waiting for the metaphorical guillotine to drop. We drove for about 20 minutes before I finally turned down a familiar street. Mia recognized it immediately, her grip on her seat tightening. I pulled into a small parking lot and killed the engine. "Thought we'd stop by here first," I said, gesturing out the window. Mia turned to look, and her face did this fascinating thing where it went through about 10 different emotions in 5 seconds. Because where were we? Ethan's apartment complex. She stared at me. "Why are we here?" I grinned. "Oh, thought we could all have a little chat." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, then opened it. "A chat?" "Yeah." I stretched, acting completely unbothered. "You, me, Ethan. 3 civilized adults sitting down, clearing the air." Mia's breathing had turned shallow. I don't think that's a good idea." I feigned surprise. "Why not?" This is weird, Max. Why would we do this?" I turned in my seat, finally letting go of the act. "Mia, stop." Her mouth snapped shut. "You're not fooling me." You haven't been fooling me for weeks. I know. Silence. Then, the last desperate move of a cornered liar. Denial. No what? She asked, her voice cracking. I laughed. I actually laughed. Mia, we're parked in front of your boyfriend's house, and you're still trying to play dumb? You don't have an escape route here. You lost. Her hands started shaking. I can explain. Oh, I'd love to hear it, I said, leaning back. Really? Go ahead. Explain how you accidentally had a months-long affair. She opened her mouth again, and for a second, I thought she was going to try. But then, something in her cracked. It was like she realized, all at once, that there was no version of this conversation where she came out looking good. She slumped back in her seat, looking absolutely wrecked. How long have you known? I smiled. Long enough to have some fun with it. And just like that, the last little string holding her together snapped. Oh my God, she muttered, covering her face with her hands. I let the silence sit for a few moments, then exhaled. All right, I said, all business now. Here's how this is going to go. Mia looked up, blinking at me. What? You're going to pack your stuff today, I said, my tone casual but firm. You're going to go wherever you want. Ethan's, a hotel, a cave in the woods, I don't care. But by the end of the night, you're out. Her mouth opened and closed a few times. You're kicking me out? I'd say we're kicking you out, but Ethan doesn't seem to be here, does he? I gestured toward the apartment. Maybe he's inside, waiting for his grand reunion with the woman who just got caught. Mia let out a shaky breath. Max, please, can we just… No, I interrupted. We can't. We're done. You don't get to cheat and then negotiate the terms of your exit. Tears started forming in her eyes. I don't have anywhere to go. I shrugged. Not my problem. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I delivered the final blow. Oh, and one last thing before you go, I said, turning to look at her fully. You might want to brace yourself for some awkward conversations. She frowned. What do you mean? I smirked. Because as of about 3 days ago, half our social circle knows what you've been up to, and they're very interested to hear how you're going to explain it. Mia paled. You told people? I shrugged. I didn't have to tell people. I just made sure the right people found out. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like she was just now realizing she had spent the last few years underestimating someone who had been quietly paying attention this entire time. I reached over, popped open the car door on her side, and gestured toward the sidewalk. Time's up, Mia. She just sat there for a second, like she was still trying to process that this was real, that her safety net had vanished, that her husband had outplayed her, that there was no getting out of this. Then, finally, she swallowed hard, grabbed her bag, and stepped out of the car. I didn't wait to watch her walk away. I shut her door, pulled out of the lot, and drove off without looking back. And just like that, Mia was officially someone else's problem. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel